Good afternoon on what is a warm, bright but cloudy day. It is Sunday, the April the 2nd, and I've got a nice hot cup of tea and a parcel to unbox. So let's open it up, find out what we've got. And inside I have this, well, actually quite thick sort of magazine, new What If book of alternative history. What if, Hitler had invaded Britain, Soviets won the space race, China had found America first. So we'd have What If alternative book of alternative history, uncover worlds where the smallest change could have diverted the course of history. So, for example, Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon had a son. The Allies lost the Battle of the Atlantic. China undiscovered first, covering royalty and leaders, war and battles, fate and circumstances. Now, I actually do own quite a few books devoted to alternative history, most notably the What If series, including What If, More What If, and What If America, all dealing primarily with sort of like military and other sort of political situations that would have changed history, all little essays, and that's generally what you kind of get. Now, What If or alternate histories tend to fall into two camps. You do get novels. Like Bring the Jubilee, I think, by Jubilee by is it Wardmore, is the most famous one, where the American Civil War is won by the South. That's the classic. But then you've got classics like, What If Hitler Wins World War II, for example. Basically, a bit of an introduction. And then we have contents page. And of course, the other thing is on the front we do have an aged. What would John F. Kennedy look like if he aged, i.e., survived the assassination in Dallas in '63? So this is probably the brightest, most vibrant version of sort of like take upon alternative history, because it's done as a magazine, lots of photographs, that sort of thing. What if, starting off with the royalty and leaders, what if Attila the Hun had survived his wedding night? So you've got these small essays, so on, and in each case you have a little timeline there. What would be different for each one. So, real timeline, and then it's split. We've got the real timeline, alternate timeline. What if we've got what if Richard the Second had kept his throne? And I got the first thing going, hold on a minute, I've seen that photograph, that image before, and it's used for Attila the Hun. So what if Richard III had lived? So, classic kind of situations, that turning points in history. What if Henry VII, VIII, and Catherine of Aragon had a son? Lots of these kind of broken down the details, and essentially, we've got the historical timeline there, the essays there, and then the author's little bio, and of course, the date where this took place. This is the point of divergence, and again, that's repeated here. It feels a little I don't know. The repetition of the artwork makes it feel a little cheap. Interesting one. What if Lady Jane Grey hadn't been deposed? Essentially, the forgotten queen. She was crowned, but it was seen as a she was an interloper, and ultimately, very quickly, deposed and beheaded. That's quite a short one, just a page long. What if Queen Elizabeth had married? That's an interesting one. Essentially, she had no heirs, and that sent us down the path of essentially ultimately unification with Scotland. Charles I had won the Civil War. I suspect we might not be a Protestant country. We might well be a Catholic one. But again, that sort of thing has been explored elsewhere. Most notably, I think in fiction, if you have a look at The Adventures of Luther Arkwright by Brian Talbot, there's a parallel there where through intervention by extra-dimensional or extra-parallel forces, the Stuarts win civil war and maintain power. Oh, turn that down again. All the way down to the current time. So yeah, other questions like what if Queen Victoria had been assassinated? There are multiple attempts on her, and then certainly earlier in her reign, and then later on you had the anarchists bombing London in the 1880s, I think, as well. And another big question of alternate history. Again, these are all big questions, and that's always the interesting thing. So, what if Abraham Lincoln hadn't been assassinated? One could joke, probably wouldn't go to the theatre. Probably go to the theatre more. What if communism had failed? Well, that's an interesting thing. This is actually more a question of Bolshevik Revolution, November 1917. Rather, essentially, that's more, what if the Bolshevik Revolution had failed? To be fair, that's a bit misleading, because ultimately it could be argued that communism did fail in certain places. So that's another big question. What would happen if JFK had survived this assassination, or not been assassinated, and gone on to a second term, which he undoubtedly would? And that's another big. I mean, this is interesting ones of sort of like American politics. Really, they're kind of coming up to date. They feel more sort of like more recent, even though sort of like they're really kind of 50, 60 years in the past. So that's all the royalties and leaders. And then we get onto the war and battles. So classic one. What if Constantinople hadn't fallen to the Turks? Will we have still a Christian outpost in the Middle East? Essentially, and then what if the Aztecs hadn't been conquered? And there's kind of interesting things that ideas of stories where the Aztec Empire survives and even ultimately invades Europe. Another short one. Their Jacobite rising succeeded, 1745. Spanish Armada been victorious, and again, the question is, why is that before? Essentially, Spanish Armada 1588 versus that seems a little bit out of order. And then, what if Britain had won the War of Independence? Would we have an America as we know it today? What if Napoleon had actually won Waterloo? It's incredible because essentially, that period is one I've actually studied quite a while ago, of course. But the outcome of the Napoleonic Wars actually effectively steered the course of European history for the next 100 years. Essentially setting up different small countries that ultimately some of them would to unify, but the tensions there, underlying tensions there, would simmer for a whole century, and beyond. So again, what if the slave states had won? I.e. the Confederacy, and then we actually sort of like, okay, interesting one I didn't think to see. What if Britain and Russia had gone to war over Afghanistan? There have been multiple wars in Afghanistan between essentially between the invading forces, between the native, essentially the various tribes of Afghanistan and various invaders. If you've starting essentially with for the British in 1842, and then sort of 1879. I think there's been sort of like three wars against Afghanistan during the 19th century, and then you come up to date with the most recent events in Afghanistan, going sort of like 1980 right through to a couple of years ago. Plus, you have Russians that involves Russia as well, and Russia was always interested in Afghanistan, wanting a path of expansion through Afghanistan to get to India. And essentially influence over the whole of Asia, which led to the whole thing about the great game between Russia and Great Britain throughout the 19th century. And this actually does cover the period Central Asia, 1893 to 2015. Okay, absolutely. And again, I'm saying another classic. If you know your alternate history, many of these, will be familiar. Whether again, would the Ottoman Empire have essentially fallen to the Republic or Revolution? Again, what if the war had continued in 1918? Oh, interesting thing. What if the US had invaded Canada? 1904, 1916. That's an interesting one that I've not come across. That would be interesting to read about. And then we have sort of leading up to World War II. So keynotes there. What if Germany had won the Battle of Britain? And no Pearl Harbor. And lost the Battle of the Atlantic. Essentially, that would mean Britain would have been cut off. Unable to couldn't be supplied. Essentially, we have the artwork leading to sort of like the classic kind of artwork. With Nazi banners flying over. If not Buckingham Palace, then the Palace of Westminster, or Houses of Parliament, so on. And then we come up to more modern times. North Korea winning the Korean War. Vietnam War, including sort of like turning into Vietnam, having sort of become a tourist attraction for Americans. Cuban Missile Crisis. What if it escalated? Faint circumstances. So here, basically, this is what if Rome had never fell? Vikings had colonised North America, which was a distinct possibility. They were sailing there. They did explore and settle. Again, that's the subject of at least one novel. What if America discovered by China first? Gunpowder plot succeeded. So that goes back to to a certain extent with what if Queen Elizabeth I had married. Gunpowder plot succeeded. Probably would have either killed the Royal Stute family, or at least most of them. Who knows who would have been there to survive. Great Fire of London, which razed much of the capital. What if Prohibition had remained in place? So, and the other thing about this is a lot of these situations, certainly in terms of if you're a gamer, if you're a role player, then these are actually sources of fantastic fantastic role-playing possibilities, exploring alternate timelines, just histories that are just different, and if you do find it, there's two good books on the subject for role-playing. GURPS Alternate Histories and GURPS Alternate Histories 2 are really worth tracking down. And then more culturally, this is important, rather than politically. What if the Beatles had never formed? What if the Soviets had won the space race? Because they were actually planning to go to the moon. What if John Wayne had joined with George Wallace to stand for president in 1968? Could he have become vice president? And then what if the Berlin Wall was still in place? And then fiction's greatest alt history timelines. So it comes to the end, it acknowledges the power of history in this genre. So yeah, here we have some of the fiction you can find and read or watch. So different things in there. Classic, one of the first steampunk novels. Then you've got the famous Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. Pavane is set in the Elizabethan period. And I actually do appreciate this. Actually, does come with some list of books. SSGB, classic, Britain taken over by the Nazis. Guns of the South. What happens if you hand, the Confederacy advanced weaponry, and so on, and then there's the years of Rise and Salt by Kim Stanley Robinson, which is the one where the China prevails. So this then is it's more of a magazine than anything else. I think this is really just a print on demand one, but it's going to be an interesting read. I mean, a lot will be familiar, some that isn't, but I think worth tracking down if you're interested in alternate histories. Anyway, thanks for watching another unboxing the Nook. If you enjoyed this, then please do click on the like button down below. And of course, if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to see more unboxings of the Nook, where you see me out here with a package containing a book, or in this case, really a magazine, which I will talk about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea, then please do click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching. Back again soon with another one. Bye for now.